Shocking news from Alberta's NDP. Fresh from their attacks on the oil and gas industry and then on farmers and ranchers, they've taken aim at schools, or to be more precise, at students, or to be even more precise, girls and the parents who love them. Let me explain. In a bizarre announcement last week, David Eggen, the Minister of Education, ordered that every school in the province, public or private, Catholic or Muslim or Jewish, every school in Alberta, from kindergarten to grade 12, must now follow transgender policies that would shock even Caitlyn Jenner. It's called Guidelines for Best Practices, creating learning environments that respect diverse sexual orientations, gender identities, and gender expressions. Okay, so it sounds like it's about not bullying gay kids. That's fine. No one wants to pick on gay kids. We've got to stop that. And the word bullying is in this document 29 times. The word respect is in there 57 times. That's good. So what's the big deal? Why am I calling this document an attack on girls when all it is protecting gay kids from being picked on? Well, I'll show it to you. In the next few minutes, I'll show you that in the name of respect and in the name of anti-bullying, this extreme NDP document does the opposite. It bullies parents and makes every single girl in the province of Alberta a guinea pig, a laboratory experiment for letting men into women's bathrooms, change rooms, and possibly even hotel rooms during girls' school field trips. In the name of protecting a handful of children who decide on their own that they're really girls trapped in boys' bodies, the NDP are putting hundreds of thousands of actual girls at risk, destroying their privacy, ignoring any family or community concepts of morality, but most importantly, risking the safety of every girl in every school in the province by forcing them to be a sacrifice on the altar of political correctness gone mad. This will result in sexual assaults. It will result in rapes. It already has in other jurisdictions. I'll show you that in a minute. But first, let me show you the new NDP rules themselves. I'm going to take you through the 18-page document so you can see with your own eyes. Let me start with the key point. It's one sentence. Self-identification is the sole measure of an individual's gender orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. Okay, just stop and think about this for a moment. It means if a boy says he's a girl, that's it. He's a girl. No matter if he's a boy, no matter if he's 6 or 16, no matter if he's kidding around, no matter if he's just trying to sneak into the girls' change room at gym class or into the girls' room on a field trip class, as teenagers sometimes do. So you can be a boy one day and then decide you're a girl the next day. If you're straight, if you're gay, whatever. Let me read that again. Self-identification is the sole measure. Sole means only. So a teacher's opinion doesn't matter. A parent's opinion doesn't matter. A doctor's opinion doesn't matter. A policeman's opinion doesn't matter. If a boy wants to go into the girls' locker room, that's all that matters, what he wants. And if the girls don't like it, well, they have to leave, not the boy. I'll show you. I'm not going to read the entire document. It's too long. You can get the whole document on our website below this video. But let's start with something kooky, just to show you what is considered normal by the NDP, by the teachers' unions who form so much of the NDP in Alberta. I'm just going to read it to you. Some individuals may not feel included in the use of pronouns he or she, and may prefer alternative pronouns such as ze, zer, her, they or them, or might wish to express themselves or self-identify in other ways, e.g. MX instead of Mr., Mrs., Miss, or Miss, or no prefix at all. So teachers, parents, and other students now have to use a made-up language to describe someone who suddenly demands it. Hang on, I thought this was about respect and against bullying, but look, that's just the silly stuff, right? No harm done other than to the English language. But look at this next part, quote, wherever possible before contacting the parents or other adults involved in the care, such as social workers or caregivers, of a student who is trans or gender diverse, consult with the student to determine an appropriate way to reference the student's gender identity, gender expression, name, and related pronouns. Okay, so there's a student that self-identifies as a she or a jur or a boy or a girl or both, and teachers are specifically instructed not to call the parents to talk about it. The whole transgender machinery is specifically organized to work on a student's own say-so, whether that student is 6 or 16, whether they're joking or serious, whether they're transgender or simply gay, whether they have a history of committing sexual assault or trying to sneak into the girls' change rooms, parents are specifically kept out of it. Okay, let's look one step further, dress codes. Here's what the NDP describes as a best practice in action. Quote, schools and school authorities proactively review existing dress codes to ensure they are respectful and inclusive of the gender identities and gender expressions of all members of the school community, e.g. rules apply equally and fairly to all students and are not gender exclusive, such as implying that a certain type of clothing, such as skirts, will be worn by one gender only. But I'm sorry, that's how Canada is. We have ways of dressing. Men and women dress differently. I mean, just one obvious example, men can go topless, women don't. Yes, I know women going topless is no longer a criminal code offense, but it's the societal norm for women not to go topless, and these are just children. So if some teenage girl were to say, hey, there's a game of basketball going on outside, and as boys sometimes play shirts versus skins, as we called it back in high school, this girl could be just like the boys and go topless? Now look, I think that is very unlikely to happen. I think the other way around is what's much more likely to happen, boys dressing as girls and destroying the entire point of a school uniform where all boys dress the same and all girls dress the same, precisely so that no one is picked on or differentiated. And again, this is all purely on one child saying so. Hey, do you think this rule will be applied in Muslim schools? Like Alberta's biggest Muslim school, the Edmonton Islamic Academy, that gets millions of dollars from the province. Look, I'm no fan of hijabs. To me, they indicate that women are second-class citizens. But is the province of Alberta, is the NDP really going to demand that this large Muslim school allow boys to be girls and girls to be boys? I'd like to see them try. I mean, here's a quick video. We've shown you this one before of one of the lectures in that Edmonton Islamic Academy about homosexuality. If this were said by a Catholic priest, I'm sure the NDP would have shut the school down by now, but it was said by a Muslim imam, and the NDP hatred for religion is usually only focused at Western religions. Take a look.
As I said, homosexuality is abnormal. This is not the norm. So for me, someone who's homosexual is like someone who has diabetics or someone who has cancer or AIDS.
In case you're wondering, these guidelines aren't just guidelines. As reported by the Calgary Herald's Don Braid, the NDP has threatened any school board that doesn't implement these rules, threaten them with dissolution, as in just dissolving, shutting down the entire school board, firing all the elected school trustees, and running the school boards right out of his office in the legislature. Here, just in case you're skeptical, let me read from the rules. Quote, all school authorities are advised to use these best practices. In these guidelines, the term authorities is used to denote public, separate, and francophone school boards, as well as charter schools and private schools. The term boards is used to denote public, separate, and francophone school boards, as well as charter schools, unquote. So, look, this applies to everyone except homeschoolers. So let's start with the sports teams, okay? Here, quote, if sports teams are divided by gender, students are given the opportunity to participate on the team that reflects their gender identity and expression, unquote. Now, I think most Canadians accept that if there's just a boys' team at a school, like, say, in hockey, no girls' team, which happens sometimes, and let's say there's a really good girl player, she should get to try out with the boys. I get that. I think that's fair. If she's good enough, why not? And of course, she would change her clothes separately from the boys' change room. But what about the reverse? For boys to play on a girls' team when there are boys and girls' teams? For a boy to choose to play on the girls' team? How's that fair? But it's one thing to wreck the fairness of the sport. But what about those changing rooms? When girls play on a boys' hockey team, they obviously change separately. Not here. Let me read you the rules. Quote, students with diverse sexual orientations, gender identities, and gender expressions have a right to accommodation when it comes to the use of washroom and change room facilities that are congruent with their gender identity. This applies during school time and school-related activities on and off school property, such as field trips and athletic events. Students are able to access washrooms that are congruent with their gender identity. So not only can boys insist that they get to play on girls' teams, but they have the right, you saw it there, a right to use washrooms and change rooms that they choose at school trips and even road trips, let alone the school. And all a boy has to do is say he's a girl. And he gets to use the girls' change room with the girls' team, girls' hockey teams, girls' cheerleading teams, girls' gymnastics teams, whatever. The boy has the right. No word about the rights of the girls. So let's put aside the obvious. Some horny boy who wants to see girls in the change room, some tomfoolery, boys being boys. Let's put aside all the obvious abuse that would come when you allow horny boys going through puberty, discovering girls, to simply declare that they want to go to the girls' change room, and they get to know that their parents won't be called first. Let's put aside all those obvious cases where boys will take advantage of this, and let's assume that you actually found a boy who really is confused about being a boy or a girl or being gay or straight or whatever, and he wants to use the girls' bathroom and change room. So let's say there isn't even any malice or a prank afoot. So what about the rights of the 30 or 300 girls who don't want a boy in the room while they are changing? Well, tough luck for them. See, this respect thing, this bullying thing, it only goes one way with the NDP. Quote, a student who objects to sharing a washroom or change room with a student who is trans or gender diverse is offered an alternative facility. This scenario also applies when a parent or other caregiver objects to shared washroom or change room facilities on behalf of their child. So any boy can use a girl's bathroom, has the legal right to do so, but a girl doesn't have the legal right to privacy in the girl's bathroom. She has the right to leave. She's the one who will be marginalized by the school establishment. Not just in the bathroom, but you heard me, on field trips. Remember those field trips in school? Teenage boys and girls going away for a few days or even a whole week? A sports tournament, a band trip, whatever. Very exciting for the kids, very nerve-wracking for the parents, especially parents of girls. I mean, are they going to be well-behaved? Will the other kids be well-behaved to them? Will the boys and girls be kept separate at night? Who's going to supervise them? Well, the NDP has an answer to those questions. Let me quote. Activities that involve the need for overnight or housing accommodations are addressed on a case-by-case basis. School staff make every reasonable effort to provide solutions that are inclusive, respectful, and acceptable to the student, and that do not impose any additional expense or burden for the student. Okay, pretty vague, but actually not really addressed on a case-by-case basis. So the answer is not fixed, though the answer is not the obvious answer, that the boys and girls will sleep separately at night. This isn't vague wording at all, come to think of it. This is wording that positively allows boys and girls to sleep in the same dorm or hotel room, teenagers, even younger children. And remember, parents aren't told about the boys' decision to use girls' facilities. What parent would possibly allow their daughter to go on a trip like that? Would you? Especially the fact that the NDP specifically says they're going to keep this sort of thing hidden from parents. Would you trust Rachel Notley or David Egan on this? Would you send your daughter away for a school trip overnight or maybe for a few nights, knowing that any boy who simply decides that he's a girl that day can go sleep in the girls' bunks, or at least will be considered on a case-by-case basis? Are you kidding me? It's a bizarre worldview that is as extreme as anything Alberta's NDP has ever done. Look at this. I'll read some more. Quote, school forms, websites, letters, and other communications use non-gendered and inclusive language, e.g. parents, guardians, caregivers, families, partners, student, or their, instead of Mr., Mrs., mother, father, etc. You get that? So schools should not use the words mother or father anymore. Don't tell me these guidelines are about respect or inclusivity. That is the opposite of respect and inclusivity. That's not about protecting some minority from being bullied. That is about bullying the majority. That's not even just bullying religious people. That's bullying anyone who believes in a family, who believes in their own family. Who wrote this insanity? Oh, and my favorite, grown men can now go into the girls' washroom. Seriously, let me read this next one. Quote, family members are able to access washrooms that are congruent with their gender identity. So it's not just kids who can pretend to be girls. So now a grown man, a parent, can walk into a school and has the right to use the girls' bathroom? What possible other meaning could that guideline have? These aren't actually guidelines, though. These are rules. School boards will be dissolved if they don't comply with the minister here. How do you feel about this? Maybe the answer depends on whether or not you have any girls in your family. This isn't about respect for gay kids or kids who are confused about their sexuality. That's a different issue. If a 6 or 10 or 15-year-old kid can actually make an informed adult decision about whether or not he's transsexual, that's a different issue. I'm not talking about whether or not to respect kids, to stop bullying against them. Of course, we want to stop bullying against anyone. But that's not what this guideline is about. This rule doesn't protect vulnerable people. It makes people vulnerable. Hundreds of thousands of girls from kindergarten all the way up to teenagers. I mentioned that this crazy bathroom law has been implemented in other jurisdictions. Let me tell you about that. In Ontario, like Alberta's new rules, in Ontario, these rules were actually passed by a legislature in the name of protecting transsexuals from being picked on, in the name of protecting gay people. Okay, but for every transsexual in the world, there are 100 scoundrels who said, this law is so stupid, it makes women so vulnerable, I'm going to take advantage of it. Like this guy, Christopher Hamburg, a man in his 30s who couldn't believe it when Ontario said, all you have to do to be a woman is to say so, and then you can get in anywhere. So Christopher Hamburg said he was a woman, and he went to a women's shelter to rape women, and they had to let him in because he's self-identified as a woman. Look at him, he's a man. But he got access to the women's shelter. He got access to the changing rooms, to the showers. Here, let me read from the court documents in his rape case. He was convicted and labeled a dangerous offender, but so what? He's still a woman because he says so. He still has the right to go wherever he wants. Let me read to you what he did to a vulnerable woman. This is from a court document. Quote, her tights had been pulled down past her bottom, and her bathing suit had been pulled to the side. She yelled at the accused, demanding to know what he was doing. He simply covered his face with his hands and said, oops, and started giggling. He also terrorized a deaf woman at the women's shelter. Let me read from the court documents. The accused grabbed the complainant's hand and forcibly placed it on his crotch area while his penis was erect. When she was taking a shower, he would peek in at her through the little gap in the door frame. He was a serial sex offender. In 2002, he was jailed for sexually assaulting a 5-year-old girl in Quebec. He raped a 27-year-old disabled woman. But in 2009, he moved to Ontario, and when they passed their bathroom law, their transgender law in 2012, he couldn't believe it. He took full advantage. He went to the women's shelter. I say again, protect gay kids. Absolutely. And if there really are kids who are transsexuals, protect them from bullying too. But that's not what these NDP rules do. They make every single girl in Alberta just as vulnerable to a sexual assault as the victims of Christopher Hamburg, a sex offender who couldn't believe his luck, who couldn't believe that the Ontario government was willing to make every woman and girl vulnerable just so they could seem politically fashionable. I tell you, if these Alberta NDP guidelines proceed, there will be sexual assaults. There will be rapes. Of course there will be. And there will be thousands of girls who are merely embarrassed and stunned at schools, who are supposed to protect and nurture them, who are supposed to be in the trusted place of parents, that those schools are now deliberately and systematically making them vulnerable and hiding what they're doing from parents. This is outrageous. We've got to stop this. visit www.ProtectOurGirls.ca to sign our petition to the government to call off this dangerous experiment.